to give you some basic understanding about dementia or interacting with people with dementia in general. For the caregivers here, perhaps some of the tips may be useful for you when you are caring for your loved ones with dementia. There's also a small percentage of you who are actually working with people with dementia that may also be helpful, because some of the principles of engaging somebody with dementia is also being used in a professional setting. And lastly, for those diagnosed with dementia, hopefully my talk will give you some ideas of how in your journey as a person diagnosed with dementia, what are the things that may be helpful for you that you want to communicate to people who are caring for you. Okay, I'm going to move on to my slide. Okay, in the well-being of the Singapore elderly, or rather WISE study for shorts, a few years ago, that was conducted by the Institute of Mental Health. It was found that 1 in 10 people aged 60 and above has dementia. So that's quite a significant percentage. And in their study, they also found that education and employment are factors that affect rates of dementia. So people who had more years of education, somehow that lowers the risk of dementia. And people who are also actively employed or employed for longer periods of time, these may be also factors that affect rates of dementia. But having said that, there are still things that can be done in terms of working with someone who has been diagnosed with dementia. And the fact is that 85% of people with dementia need care, some or most of the time. And caregivers of people with dementia usually will report significantly more distress and psychological problems than caregivers of those without dementia. And that is because of the fact that dementia is usually long drawn. It may span over several years. And caregivers of people with dementia often has to look out for a lot of factors during the caregiving journey. So just like I mentioned, that education and perhaps employment may affect the incidence of dementia. But in recent years, Prof Kwah Hee Hyuk and a few other psychiatrists also carry out this Age Well Everyday program in the Jurong area. And they found that for seniors who engage in active programs of health education, exercise, mindfulness practice, art and music, reminiscence activities, horticulture, all these can actually not only increase their social participation and reduce anxiety and depression, they somehow also delay the onset of dementia. So this study has been done over a few years, and it culminated in a volunteer-driven program called the Age Well Everyday program. Okay. So I'd like to now talk a little bit more about the concept of dementia by playing a short clip. This is a movie by Eric Koo back in 2013. It's called Recipe. And this very short clip just portrayed an aspect of somebody who is experiencing dementia. Oops, sorry. Let me get the video on.
安迪，你不是说7块半的吗？我刚才给你10块钱，你好像找错钱给我。这里就1块半。
块半吗？
是啊，你应该找2块半给我，可是这里少1块。
哎，没错啊，是7块半，老板娘，你得找他多1块哦。哦，不好意思啊，回去他找错了，对不起啊。
Okay, as seen here, the lady in this clip, she's supposed to be a mother of Zoe Day, who is also in this movie, and she is the owner of a rice stall. So the initial presentation of dementia may be some problem-solving ability, forgetfulness, and in her case, some money management issues. So sometimes dementia may start off with such presentation. And dementia is largely stated to be of 3 stages. So at the early stage, the person may have some memory problems. There may be some subtle personality changes, okay, becoming maybe a bit more rigid and a bit more irritable. There may be also some problems in judgment and also abstract thinking. Okay, abstract thinking means be able to understand proverbs or concepts that are not so straightforward. So at the mid stage, that's where the person may require assistance in managing everyday tasks. Okay, it may be a community living task, it may be daily self-care tasks. And at the advanced stage, the person may be unable to recall addresses and names of family members. There may sometimes also be other issues such as talking to self, hallucinations, hearing voices, seeing things, or delusions, having certain fixed beliefs that are not correct. So in this slide, we have a picture of Ronald Reagan, who was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and he has been cared for by his wife over long periods of time. So for persons at the early stage or mild dementia, they are usually they are capable of some verbal and behavioral learning. So if they are a bit forgetful, you can actually teach them new strategies, such as coming up with a list of things, putting the reminders in the mobile phone. So some of these behavioral learning can still be taught. They are also able to use familiar strategies. So some of the adults, the older adults, they may have familiar strategies such as putting certain things in the same place all the time so that they are able to find it, retrieve it, organizing things in a certain way so that they are able to plan their activities better. So you should encourage the use of these familiar strategies. In addition, you also need to encourage them to continue participating in social activities. A lot of times it may mean some environmental setup or to provide with them with some supervision or assistance, but that will help them in a long way in terms of being able to maintain their function. And the last aspect is that there's still intact basic activities of daily living. Showering, grooming, and eating. I think largely people with early dementia are still able to do so. There may also be possible difficulties that people with early stage or mild dementia may encounter. So they may have problems in memory and problem solving. So for example, the lady in the video clip just now, she may start experiencing difficulties in money management, gradually may forget certain things. So this often results in frustration and anxiety with increasing memory problems because there is awareness that, that the person is having problems with remembering items. So this would definitely affect the person's emotions, and the frustration and anxiety is something that a lot of people with mild dementia often experience. A lot of people with early stage dementia, they may be working and they may experience gradual difficulties in social and work settings. So sometimes a good support at the work setting may be very important in order to help the person with mild dementia to stay at work for as long as possible. And in addition to that, there may also be increasing difficulties in community living. So things like grocery shopping, using public transportation to new places might pose challenges. But as far as possible, families and friends, you should try as much as possible to still help the person with mild dementia to continue engaging in these community living activities. So how do we then help them in doing so? You then have to look at the person, himself or herself, the activities, as well as the environment. So in terms of helping them, it's not a straight answer. And I've seen a lot of families, once the parents have been diagnosed with dementia, they start bringing in the foreign domestic helper, start putting in a lot of things in place, which actually show their filial piety. But at the same time, you might say, you might tell the helper, you must follow the madam everywhere she goes. If she wants to touch the kettle, don't let her touch anything that's hot. Don't let her try to cook. Do everything for her. We tend to be very protective of our elderly parents or the elderly in general in the Asian culture. But while that will keep them safe, this may rob them of the ability to stay as independent for as long as possible. So instead, we might want to actually look at what are the things that we can put in place to enable the person with dementia to engage in the activities that he or she likes for as long as possible, so that functioning can still be maintained despite the memory decline, despite the problem-solving difficulties. Okay? So what do I mean by looking at the person? You might want to find out what are his or her valued interests and responsibilities. So for caregivers here, if you are the children, you will be aware, okay, since young, what do your parents like? What do your parents enjoy doing most? Okay, and if you are a professional or if you work with somebody with dementia, you might want to try to find out from the family members. What does he or she used to enjoy in the past? What are the things that interest her? What are the things that, even though she's not been doing for several years, but in the past, she told you that she actually done it before? Okay, so all these past valued interests and even responsibilities might be helpful, especially for males. Because for males, especially the older males, they spend years working, so they may have very little outside interest, but the work itself may still be of value to the person. So let's say, for example, a person with dementia used to be an accountant, so he will still be very interested in numbers. So maybe an activity that's associated with numbers may be interesting for him. Okay, so you might want to look at that first. Secondly, what type of strategies is he able to learn? Is he a visual person? Would putting in reminders in the phone help for him or her? Or is he or she the type that you're actually writing down on a piece of paper and getting him or her to carry along will be useful? Or is he more of a hearing person? When he hears from you reminders, he or she is able to take in. Okay, or is he more of a touching tactile person? That means if you want to get him to do something, he must be able to touch it and feel the objects so that he gets interested. Okay, the next one, what is his or her preferred communication style? Okay, does he or she likes humor? Okay, if you make it if you make the conversation light for him or her, he's actually more interested to engage in the activity. So all these may be helpful when you try to understand the person with dementia and to match an activity for him or her. Bearing in mind that dementia is a progressive condition, so whatever strategies that he or she is able to learn now, they may change at a later stage. Okay. So the second part is about activities. As much as possible, if you can find an activity that he or she likes to do, of course, present it in the authentic form. But a lot of times you may find yourself that you need to break down the activities into steps. So, for example, later on I'll show you a cooking task. So, for example, if the older adult likes to do gardening, so instead of doing all the tasks associated with gardening, vegetative propagation and all that, you might want to do the setup for him or her, and then get her to do the later part of the task. You can think of ways to simplify the steps, okay, whether there are certain things that can be made ready for the person, and reduce the need for multitasking. So whether or not the task is something that she can complete a few steps first, then rest, and then complete the other aspects of the task instead of trying to do a few steps at the same time. And a lot of times, just now I mentioned about the part about frustration and anxiety, about forgetfulness. So we try to create opportunities for success and satisfaction rather than frustration and anxiety, because people with dementia, they do forget. And especially people with mild dementia, they know that they are forgetting. So how to then create the success and satisfaction such that it encourages the person with dementia to continue engaging in the task. Okay, as for the environment, you might want to look at the physical environment to aid in the completion of activities. Okay, is the environment free from clutter? Because sometimes if you get the person with dementia to, let's say, help you in folding clothes, but if there are so many items on the bed, then it becomes too overwhelming for the person with dementia to really help you in this household task. So you might want to look at whether or not you can declutter, whether or not you can make the environment more comfortable, less noisy for the person with dementia to engage in activity. You might also want to create a social support that's accommodating. Try not to artificially get the person to engage in activities that is not purposeful. I know in some day centers or in hospital settings, sometimes staff want to keep persons with dementia occupied. So they end up getting the person with dementia to, I think, just pick out some bits and then put it in another box, pick out some bits and put it in another box. Then once the person with dementia has finished the task, the staff actually, right in front of the person with dementia, mix up all the bits again. And the person with dementia will wonder, why do you ask me to do something, then you mess up all the things again? So it again must be authentic task. It must be meaningful and done in a natural setup. Okay. So back to that task about separating the bits. So if you get a person with dementia to separate the bits, okay, then after that, the separated bits, you get actually the person with dementia to maybe make an item, okay, make a jewelry. So that becomes something that's natural, okay? And if you can create it as a social event, that's even better. Okay, let's do this together. Let's make the bits together. Okay, just now I mentioned about reducing environmental distraction. That will be very important. I'm sure you all have the experience when you're trying to remember a name or trying to remember some facts and people start talking to you or the environment is very noisy, it's very hard for you to recall information. Okay, so similarly, people with dementia, if you're trying to get them to do a task that requires some memory work, you will want to actually keep the environment free from distractions. And lastly, providing social reinforcements. Okay, that can be in the form of giving them some positive reinforcement. So let's say, just now I mentioned about separating bits. Sometimes it can be something else. Let's say separating the red bean from some other food item. So after the person has done the separation, maybe you get them to cook the food. And then when the product comes out in the form of red bean soup, it's actually a social reinforcement. Okay, that everybody eats the red bean soup. It becomes socially rewarding for the person with dementia. Okay. All right, so to give you an example, so let's say Mrs. X, okay, she likes to cook. So you may teach strategies to overcome problems in meal preparation. So if Mrs. X wants to make a dish and she wants to go and buy the dish, you may want to come up with strategies such as chunking. Later on, I'll go into detail. That means you organize the list into categories. And you can also use the strategy of external aids, using the timer to prompt her to check the cooking on the stove. So the other aspect is to look at the environment. Do you want to label things? Do you want to place commonly used items within visual field? And also provide some visual cues, such as the steps of completing a task. Now, it's not to say that you should actually turn the whole kitchen into like a commercial kitchen where everything is labeled. Sometimes with all this labeling that looks so artificial, it may not be welcoming, or it may not be nice for somebody with dementia. So as much as possible, any adaptation must make sense and must be helpful for the person with dementia. A lot of times, just simply by placing the commonly used items within visual field will be helpful. So let's say, for example, you want to get the person with dementia to make Milo. So keep the Milo, keep the kettle within visual field, keep the cups and the utensils that the elderly normally use within visual field, such that he or she will then be more able to accomplish the task. Okay. So you need to individualize it to the person and activities. A lot of times when visual aids, if you just recommend a lot of aids, a lot of reminder prompts, a lot of timers to the person with dementia, and you don't teach the person with dementia how to use them, they will be pretty much useless. Okay. So another very important aspect of the environment is the social environment. I think the good thing about the past few years is that the Agency for Integrated Care has done a lot of outreach sessions and also have done a lot of education in the community to build up dementia-friendly community. So it's actually to build up a social community such that people within the housing estate understands about dementia and are willing to support persons with dementia. So right now, there are several dementia-friendly communities. So if you live in Yishun, Hong Kong North, MacPherson, Queenstown, Bedok, Fengshan, Bukit Batok East, Woodlands, and even more, you will realize that actually people in that estate, they may have gone through some training in helping persons with dementia. Some of them may also have signed up as dementia friends. So I have a link here on Dementia Friends, but this one you can just Google Dementia Friends. You will see that actually there are a lot of resources to help people understand what dementia is about. And brahmcentre, our staff have also gone around the different dementia-friendly communities to promote this Dementia Friends app to hawkers and shops in this particular one is in MacPherson. So it's to actually harness the whole social community to enable the person with dementia to live as independently as possible within the community. I've heard of stories like, for example, if the person with dementia, he may keep going to the same provision store to buy bread, but instead of just locking him up at home because he's buying too many loaves of bread every day, the actual communication was set up between the man's son and the provision shop owner that let him buy his bread. Then at the end of the day, the son will just return the bread, then the provision shop owner will just return the money, because it is a meaningful task for the person with dementia. I think he used to buy food items for the family. So it's such arrangement like this that will help to keep the person with dementia as active as possible. So if you're caring for somebody with dementia, it may be useful to build out a network of care for the person with dementia, such that it will relieve you as a caregiver the sole burden of it. Okay. All right, so you might want to build a network with your areas, local businesses, neighbors, and constituencies. I think by and large, people are caring and they want to help persons with dementia. So it is this kind of network that will provide support for community living. Okay, so I've talked about person and the environment. I'm just going to mention a little bit about activities. So just now I mentioned about cooking. So let's say that a person with dementia, she would like to continue to cook char kway teow. So this is a recipe. Of course, I think different people, you all cook char kway teow differently. This is just a recipe that I pull out from one of the sources. So if the step of cooking char kway teow for this person is, firstly, she has to marinate the meat, then heat the shallot and lard oil, then fry the garlic and add the marinated meat, turn up the heat. Then number 4, add dark soy sauce, stir fry, add the prawns, and then followed by adding the kway teow. Point number 5, add the fish sauce, ketchup mayonnaise, Chinese sausage, stir fry, add the bean sprouts. Number 6, create a well in the middle, add the beaten egg, then stir fry to distribute the egg. Then number 7, add the cockles and stir fry. So it may be very complicated for the person with dementia, especially when the person with dementia slowly finds that she's unable to organize the steps very well. She may not be able to assemble all the items. She may not be able to plan some of the steps, like have to marinate the meat first, and too many items, too many ingredients in the char kway teow. So what are the things that you can do? You might want to consider that instead of telling the person with dementia that, oh, yeah, I don't think you can cook char kway teow anymore, sounds a bit dangerous. You may want to try to start off by just reducing the number of ingredients. Okay. May want to help the person by preparing some of the ingredients beforehand. Let's say you might want to prepare the Chinese sausage, you might want to marinate the meat for the person beforehand, you might want to prepare the prawns beforehand for the person with dementia. If the person with dementia somehow find that she cannot somehow organize the step well, again, you might want to get her to write down the steps, or you may want to write down the steps and then verify with her and then put it as a visual cue for her to remind herself. So that may help the person to be able to follow through the steps and cook a plate of char kway teow successfully. Okay, if need be, you can provide some physical help. So it doesn't mean that you cannot touch the person at all. You might want to physically help in some of the steps. Okay, so all these are things that as a caregiver or as somebody who is interacting with a person with dementia, or if you have dementia yourself, you might want to also ask for this help, is to enable the person with dementia to be able to engage in something that is meaningful for him or her. And that itself may slow down the functional deterioration. Okay, so along the same lines, I would like to show you a video about how you can get people with dementia to be meaningfully engaged by tailoring the activities.
There are some important things to consider when presenting activities. For example, remove any distractions, including clutter and unnecessary noise from the immediate area. Have all the required items in one place and close at hand. Where possible, establish boundaries for the activity. Invite the person to join in the activity.
Would you like to help me?
Break tasks into smaller steps. Use a template if required. Demonstrate how to do the activity.
Look at me.
Yes.
Look at me. Okay.
Give the person something to hold. Thank the person for their help. Ask if they enjoyed it and if they would like to do it again sometime.
Thanks, Clyde. Some people worry about us using the sharp knives in the kitchen, but we think it's just part of everyday life, and everybody has used the sharp knives in their own kitchen at home.
In the beginning of the project, we were a bit concerned about some of our issues with food handling, infection control, falls, but we've been able to alleviate that by following all regulations.
Everybody washes their hands before they help out in the kitchen, and then puts a pair of gloves on.
Explaining to the staff that every day is a risk in life, when we get out of bed, when we cross the road, and that is no different for our clients, and of course minimising those risks. So we look at the areas here, we have rails and all that sort of thing, so we encourage the staff to look at it like that every day is a risk for everybody, and took some doing and the change has been incredible. Even you see people here dancing now with walking sticks and touching their toes. 6 months ago, that never would have happened, not in a million years.
So as we can see here, there are a few tips. You can demonstrate, you can remove distractions, you can give very specific directions, you can even set up templates. So all these actually go a long way to help a person with dementia to feel confident. So as you can see in the videos, they are dancing, they are using knives to cut things, and all this, it being a true authentic activity engagement, they are doing it in a social manner, they are age appropriate. So all this improves the quality of life for people with dementia. And a lot of times, because of this meaningful engagement, the pace of deterioration is slower. The incidences of some stuff like to call it behavior issues, they become lower. So while it's a bit more tedious, to be honest, when you want to set up activities like that, look at environment, it is more tedious than just asking the domestic helper to help do everything. But in the long run, it actually benefits the caregivers, it benefits the person with dementia. So I'm just going to go next on a simple exercise to teach persons with dementia. Sorry, to go backwards, just now, this particular video clip, I think brahmcentre staff, if you could just copy the link in the chat box. So for participants here, at your own time, you can view this video clip again, because I find this very helpful. The other video clip that's helpful is simple exercise. So if you would like to teach simple exercises for older adults, this is a good one. I'm just going to show about 1 or 2 exercises, because the rest of the exercise you can actually view on the video clip on YouTube. If while you watch the video clip, you can actually do the exercise at the same time. Okay, so let's start now.
We're going to start out doing a couple deep breaths. I want you to raise your arms when you inhale. Inhale through your nose and exhale through your mouth, okay? Here we go. So inhale, raise your arms up. And exhale, take them down. Good job. Inhale. And exhale. Last time, and we're going to stretch at the top. Stretch your fingers. Inhale, stretch those fingers. There you go. Wiggle them around and back down. Okay, this exercise is going to work on a lot of times when we go to the hospital or we have transfers or people are needing to help us, they're asking us to hold up our feet. So this is really important for our core, but working those muscles on those legs. So we're going to hold up our legs for 5 counts first, okay? So you're going to take your legs straight up. There you go. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Good job. Let's rest for 3. 1, 2, 3, and we're going to go back up for 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Good job. Rest for 3. 1, 2, and 3. This time we're going to hold it up for 8, all the way up. All the way up. There you go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now I want you to rest for 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now we're going to challenge you. I want you to hold your feet up for 12 counts. Here we go. You can do it. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Keep going. 10, 11, and 12. Good job. Rest your feet. That's really important if you're, you know, the hospital's a big place, and if people are asking you to hold up your legs and you don't have pedals on your wheelchair, it's really important to have that strength, because if you accidentally put down your legs, you know, you could have an accident or hurt yourself, or person pushing you could be hurt too. So we want to be careful. Okay, the next exercise that we are going to do is we're going to work our core a little bit again. So sit up as straight as you can in your chair and put your feet flat on the floor. There we go. So we're going to inhale through our nose, and when we inhale, we're going to just, as we move forward, we're going to exhale and kind of push that out. And this is a good exercise. A lot of times we're asked to put our hands on the side of the chair and bend to stand up. So this is an exercise that's going to work your core, helping you get up out of a chair easier, okay? So inhale and exhale. That's 1. Inhale back up. And exhale. That's 2.
Okay, so you get the idea. So a lot of times you may want to engage in simple exercise for people with dementia to get them to be still physically fit. And exercise are helpful for some of them, because you might have seen also people with dementia wandering behavior. But if you keep them engaged, get them to sit down, do some exercise, it will actually give them some kind of physical engagement for them to be able to still be physically active. Okay. All right, I'm just going to touch a little bit about cognitive stimulation. Several years at IMH, one of the occupational therapies come up with this app, which is in general provides some kind of stimulation through games for people with dementia. So there are several categories of games. I'm just going to show you a couple of them. So the first game is called Lim Si Mi. And basically, yeah. So it's to get the person to just pick up the correct drink. So it has some information processing, some hand-eye coordination, and of course also counting. So the person has to count the correct number of Milo drinks. Okay. Then another game is sorting the dollar notes into the wallet and coins into the coin jar. Okay, so by and large, these are mainly a general cognitive stimulation games to just provide some kind of stimulation, okay, to get them to be cognitively engaged. It does not necessarily improve attention or memory or problem solving, but it does give them some kind of engagement, okay, counting, sorting things out. Because sometimes if you want to really get them to sort out physical items, it does take a bit of setup. But if there are such games around online, it can prove to be fun for a person with dementia to engage in. But obviously, they also need to be culturally appropriate. If you go online, there are several such games. Rather than just throwing any game to the person with dementia, look at it, check whether or not this is culturally appropriate for the person with dementia. Are they too westernized? Are there objects that the person with dementia can relate to? Is the language or the accent used easily understood? So all these we have to take into consideration when you get a person with dementia to play such games. Okay. Okay, I'm now going to talk a little bit about self-management. So in general, for early to mid-stage dementia, you are getting them to engage in pleasurable activities to enhance mood. You want to identify meaningful activities to participate with friends and family. You also want to get them to maintain any positive relationships. And at the same time, also looking at the emotional aspects. Okay, coping with functional decline is not easy. The realization that we are slowly forgetting things, slowly not being able to do the things that we used to enjoy doing, or that brings us a lot of satisfaction. So that itself, we may need to be aware and work out coping strategies for that, both for the person with dementia as well as the caregivers. And also to find ways to communicate anxiety, low mood, frustration, etc. To give an outlet or to acknowledge anxiety, to acknowledge the low mood. Sometimes family members and the person with dementia may go through this period. So how do then everyone support each other in making sense of the changes? So very importantly is about also assessing community as well as educational resources to get help to understand this condition better. Okay, we also want to break the vicious cycle, because when someone with dementia forgets something, they feel frustrated, anxious, and the tendency is to withdraw because I've tried doing this, it wasn't successful, I stopped doing it now. But when you stop doing something that used to be valued, that actually increase your stress level. So when that increase your stress level, when you get more stressed, more depressed, you may forget things even more, and that's where the vicious cycle come about. Okay, so you want to break this vicious cycle. If you are a caregiver, former caregiver, you can help the person with dementia to structure the days by deciding on the time for the self-care activities, social activities, work type activities, etc. You may want to prompt the person to refer to the schedule. A lot of times for family members, you also have various responsibilities. So if you want to get help, let's say, for example, a foreign domestic helper to help you in that, you can set out a daily schedule, train the foreign domestic helper to learn how to use the schedule with the person with dementia. You may also want to set up certain activities for them first. Okay, so if you want to garden rather than to do everything for them, you may want to set up the items for the gardening for the person, and then get the person to engage in the gardening, maybe with the help of the helper. Okay. Okay, the other thing is also towards the mid stage of dementia. In engaging in activities, we might also want to use the different senses. So I'm going to show you the clip again. It's from Recipe, and that's where Zoe Day will be the mother. And when you view the clip, I'd like you to try to pick up what are the different senses that the mother is experiencing. So you might see that she's using a sense of vision. She's trying to select different items. She's using the sense of smell. She's trying to smell the spices, sense of touch when she's touching the food items, and also the physical part when they're taking a stroll. Okay, I'm going to play the video now. So there's sense of taste, smell, touch, and all this. And it's good to actually engage in the different senses to provide that kind of stimulation for people with dementia. Sometimes the functional decline may happen when the person is sensory deprived or not engaged, or it may be other things such as boredom and so forth that may also lead to agitation. So using the different senses may be helpful, but of course bearing in mind not to be overly sensory stimulating for the person with dementia, which I'll mention a little bit later on. Okay, and sometimes reminiscence may be helpful. People at the mid or early stage of dementia, they may forget about immediate things, but they can remember things in the past very well. And if you show them photos of, I believe the one on the top left is Lin Dai, then some sweet woman, the places in the past that the person with dementia actually lived through in the past, places of interest, people, and use that to get the person with dementia to engage in conversations with you. And that can actually give you a lot of very good information about the person with dementia. And when you discuss things that happened in the past, and I'm sure I think some of you, when you meet up with old friends and you talk about the past, it's very comforting for you, especially when you talk about positive experiences, okay, nice experiences in the past. So that can be very mood enhancing, but of course avoid topics that may evoke bad memories. Okay. Remember, relax the rules. Don't rush, even in conversation. Sometimes it takes a while for the person with dementia to engage, because it may take a while for the person with dementia to start to relieve those memories. And it may get the person with dementia to take quite a while to feel motivated enough to engage in the task that you want him or her to do. Okay, especially if there has been failures in the past, or especially if there's been frustration, agitation in the past. Okay, do not overstimulate. If you make the task too challenging for the person with dementia, the person with dementia may feel very frustrated, and that will set him or her back. And you may also, in terms of stimulation, it can be if the places is too noisy, if the lighting is too harsh, that sometimes also may make the person with dementia agitated. You may also want to simplify the communication. If you have some instructions in your mind, maybe offer 1 or 2 step instructions first, get the person with dementia to finish the task, then continue with another 1 or 2 step instructions. Okay, I'm going to mention a little bit about what we call Bpsd, which are the behavioral and psychological symptoms of dementia. It usually happens during the middle or the late stages of dementia. So the behavioral symptoms may include physical aggression, okay, loud vocalization. Physical aggression may mean that they might pull at you, or they might want to hit people. Vocalization may be shouting, restlessness, walking around, sleep problems, appetite changes or wandering. And psychological symptoms may include irritability, anxiety, depressive mood, hallucination, okay, hearing or seeing things, or delusion, certain fixed false beliefs. Okay, I'm going to launch the last poll now. Okay, for this poll, you can select multiple responses. So when a person with dementia is agitated, what do you think are the correct statement? Okay, I'm going to end the poll now. Thanks for voting. Okay, so these are the results of your poll. Okay, looking at the 90%, he or she may be overwhelmed with the activities. You are right. So if something is too overwhelming, then it may lead to agitation. And the second highest voting is he or she may be having a physical problem such as pain. Yes, that's right, especially when the person with dementia has got difficulty in locating the pain or communicating the pain. There may be agitation. He or she is not necessarily throwing tantrums. There may be some discomfort. It may be a consequence of the nature of dementia that may lead to the agitation. So it's sometimes unfair to say that they are throwing tantrums or they are having behavioral problems. And it's certainly not the caregiver's fault. A lot of times, I think if you are the caregiver, you may feel guilty when somebody with dementia is exhibiting agitation or sleep problems. But to bear in mind that the Bpsd, the behavioral or psychological symptoms of dementia, is a very common presentation in people with dementia, not necessarily due to the caregiver's fault. And people who have worked with dementia or who are caregivers, sometimes you may be scolded by a person with dementia, sometimes you may be spat at, but it's usually not because of you, it's maybe because of the mixture of the person's physical problem, the activity that he or she is engaging in, as well as the environment. So not necessarily the person who is engaging with someone with dementia at that point in time. Okay. All right, so to go on, okay, let me try sharing again. Okay, so if you remember this paid approach, firstly, you may want to look at the physical problem. Is there any infection? Sometimes there may be infections such as urinary tract infection. There may be pain. If a person with dementia is wheelchair bound, there may be pressure sores. So all these may lead to agitation or activity related, the activity being too overwhelming. Some people with dementia, they might really hate certain activities like bathing. I don't know whether or not you come across that you may have worked with somebody who just refuse to bathe. You may be caring for somebody who just refused to brush teeth in the morning. So it can be activity related. It may also be intrinsic to dementia, such as wandering. So it's very common. There may also be depression and delusions. So if there are certain psychological or psychotic symptoms, you may want to take the person with dementia to see a psychiatrist to address the mood problems or the psychotic symptoms. Okay, so sensory factors, just to reiterate, too much noise, too many people, activities too challenging, sometimes even hot or cold. We may not notice that the place is too cold, but for them, it may actually lead to agitation. Or even clothing, sometimes new types of clothing that can actually lead to some discomfort on the body. It may also make the person with dementia agitated. Okay, so if you can use sensory methods that can calm the person with dementia down, that may also work, such as soothing music that the person with dementia used to enjoy. Okay, calming pictures or images, quiet and peaceful environment, pleasing smells, particularly smells that are familiar for the person with dementia. Okay, certain items, certain herbs. Calming movements also, such as rocking chair. Okay, some elderly people, they love this because of the effect of rocking. It can be quite calming. Or pleasing textures, pets and dolls. In some nursing homes, they use dolls as therapy. So using these methods to calm someone down may be helpful. And I'm now going to just mention a little bit about validation. If you have worked with people with dementia before, sometimes they may get agitated and they may start having certain ideas. For example, they may say, I want to see my my aunt. You know that aunt has passed away years ago. So how do you manage that?
One of the residents that I had engaged with, she was trying to find her mother. At this point in time, her mother had already passed away. It's not good to tell them that their mother had passed away. So you try to enter into their world. And we sat down, we talked. I said, what is the matter? She said, I'm looking for my mother. I have to get home because I have to be there to feed my brothers and sisters. And I said, oh my goodness. Well, I know your mom will be worried about you. I said, well, how old are your brothers and sisters and how many do you have? I started to transition from mother to brothers and sisters. She told me she had 4 brothers and sisters. And I said, well, what do you do for your brothers and sisters? And she told me she cooks for them. I said, oh, wow, I'm a cook too. What do you like to cook? She told me what she likes to cook. So now we transitioned from her focus point on her mom to what she likes to cook. Her mood became much easier. She told me, thank you for sitting with me. You're so nice. And I hope that you would come to my house one day and cook with me. And I said, thank you, I would too. Validation therapy is very beneficial. It works.
Okay, so as you can see from the video, don't get into argument with a person with dementia, even though what they claim to want to do is not realistic. So in this case, you may just want to get into their world. Okay, acknowledge them, validate their concerns, and then shift the attention to something that's related. So for that particular person with dementia, she wants to find her mom. But I think that sometimes the feelings behind it is just to get the social connection that with people that she used to have very strong relationships with. Then from there, acknowledge the intentions and the feeling behind the things that the person wants to do, and then transit it to something that's related, that is still valued by the person with dementia. So in this case, cooking. Okay, cooking for the family. So the conversation can then move on to about cooking with the family and something that you can then engage with the person with dementia rather than to argue with him or her. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about caregiver stress because some of you are caregivers here. And family members and caregivers can experience burnout from caring for someone with dementia. It's definitely not a sign of weakness or being unfilial when you say that you are burnt out. And but it's very important to manage that if you are beginning to experience burnout, because if you are not doing anything about the burnout, it may hurt you. It may also hurt the person with dementia. So as much as possible, utilize community resources. Just now I mentioned about dementia-friendly communities. There are also a lot of support network for people with dementia. So listed down in this slide is the Alzheimer's Disease Association. They run a lot of caregiver support groups. They also run a lot of online talks about caring for people with dementia. They also have respite services. So you may want to check this out. At brahmcentre, there's also this mindful caregiver network whereby caregivers come together to share experiences, to have mindfulness practice. And very importantly is to, as a caregiver, to find small pockets of time for your own pleasurable activities. It may be very tough, but even if it's 10 minutes a day, it actually will go a long way to provide you with the energy to look after a person with dementia. So it may be, sometimes you may find guilty, oh, if I spend time on myself, how about my loved ones with dementia? But if you can set up an activity or just get somebody else to look after the person with dementia for a short period of time, that even 10 minutes, 15 minutes can help you to recharge for a while before you take over the task again. So at brahmcentre, there is a care management service whereby care coordinators will visit clients at their home, provide counseling and emotional support to clients and their caregivers, and also to encourage the clients to engage in social activities. They may also work with community partners to ensure the client's medication compliance, etc. There are also befrienders from brahmcentre, whereby trained volunteers may provide support to lonely elderly persons with dementia and caregivers. And the volunteers may also chat with the befriendees or engage in activities with them. So if you want to find out more about these brahmcentre services, you can go to the website. And on the website, there are brahmcentre contact numbers that you can actually get in touch with a brahmcentre staff. Okay, so lastly, I just want to talk a little bit about maybe the later stage of dementia. At the later stage of dementia, you can still use a bit of validation, and sometimes just using music or tunes that are familiar, talking to the person with dementia may help the person with dementia to connect. This video is by the founder of Validation Therapy. So what she does is she uses a bit of music and she also uses a bit of validation to engage with somebody who's at the late stage of dementia.
When people are very old and deteriorated and no one enters their world and they're just sitting there, they will withdraw inward more and more. And their desperate need for connection is all now inside. And if a person is all alone, even if they're very, very deteriorated, there's a longing for this kind of closeness. Mrs. Wilson, hello. You want me to sit? Can you see me good? Gladys Wilson is a wonderful example of a person who is in the phase of repetitive motion, where people use movements, repetitive movements, because they don't have any more speech or very little speech, but they have human needs that need to be expressed. You're crying. You're crying. You have a tear right here in your face. You have a little pain. You don't want me to touch you. You're very sad. Can you see me? Is it scary? Are you afraid? And if this person sits with their eyes closed, rocking back and forth, and maybe there's a tear coming down, there's a need there. There's a little tear that's coming out. Do you feel it? You feel a little tear? If you gently use touch, and I touched Gladys Wilson for the fingertips right here on the cheek, is where the mother usually touches a child. If you touch an infant there, it looks up, and every cell remembers where it was touched by the mother. And often that person knows, even if they can't say a word at that moment, they won't talk, or they don't want to talk, but there's a communication, and that person is no longer alone. Can you let me in a little bit? You think? Just a little? You think I could be with you and Jesus for a minute? Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. I used music, because when speech is gone, music, especially with Gladys Wilson, it was religious music, because there's emotion tied to it and safety tied to it. So I used her old church songs. Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so. What I did was, when she moved, I moved with her. And when I was singing, because she didn't sing with me, so I matched the intensity of my voice to the intensity of her movement. And pretty soon, for a split second, we became one person. Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so. So at one point, when she got very quiet and very peaceful, and my voice became very quiet as hers and very peaceful, and my breathing slowed to her breathing, she pulled me to her, and I moved with her. And for her, at that moment, I believe I was a symbol of her mom. Can you open your eyes now? Do you see me? Feel safe and warm? Yes? Can you sing with me? He's got the whole world in his hands. 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 He's got the mothers and the fathers. He's got the mothers and the fathers in his hands. He's got the mothers and the fathers in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. The breakthrough doesn't happen every time. The person will not always look there.
Okay, so I thought that's one of the most moving clips I've ever seen. The people at the late stage of dementia, no matter how uncommunicative they are, there's still a need for connection. So it's a caregiver or somebody who's working with someone with late stage dementia, I think there's still a connection to be made. And it can be done in several ways, as what Naomi Fell has demonstrated just now. So I just want to end my talk with a quote who's the president of the Dementia Care Specialists. She said that we can have a meaningful relationship with persons at the very end stage of dementia if we get into their world, unlock the emotion and unlock the potential that lies within persons with Alzheimer's at all stages.